Okay, everyone. Warmly welcome to KTH in Africa Days. Welcome to the audience present in this room and also to the audience that we have attending virtually through the streaming service. My name is Tina Murray, and I have the honor of being moderator of this session and also a session later on today. A few words about this event. It spans over 4 days, so it's a major effort that we're making to try and visualize the activities that KTH has in Africa. You can choose to be part of all the sessions, or you can pick the ones that are of most interest to you. We also have a poster session, and the poster session will be up and running all through the event, so it's Monday until Thursday. The Africa Days, like I said, we see this as an opportunity of sharing our vision and our strategies for our ventures in Africa. And the KTH management has decided to increase focus on activities in Africa, both on the side of education, research, and also innovation ventures. We will also be touching on aside from a number of research efforts that will be presented during these days, we will also be focusing on the issue of responsible internationalization, which is something which is becoming more and more in focus worldwide, and which is very relevant. But I would also like to, before we start with the presentation, I would also like to say a few words about another venture that we have, and that is our KTH in Africa community that we are initiating as of today, actually. There are small posters all around the place, I think even in the restrooms, with information about the community and a QR code. So if you check the QR code, then you can learn more about the community in the African community. The ambition is to bring together colleagues, faculty, students, alumni, interested in collaboration, already existing collaboration, or venturing into new collaboration efforts with partners in Africa. And we are hoping that this will be the start of sort of expanding the network here at KTH regarding African issues. With that said, enough from me. One of the most pleasant tasks of being a moderator is to introduce the speaker. And this speaker is a very special person whom I have a great deal of respect for. I've heard him talk before. I've also participated in many of the seminars that he has arranged, and he's making a tremendous effort here at KTH in building one of our newest research centers, which is the Climate Action Center, which is a transdisciplinary center, all crossing different disciplines here at KTH. The name of the person is Francesco Fuso-Nerini. He is Associate Professor here at KTH at the Division of Energy Systems, and like I said, he's also the Director of the KTH Climate Action Center. His focus is, in his research, is on addressing multidisciplinary sustainable development-related issues, including how future climate change and action, energy choices, and AI will affect the achievement of the climate and sustainable development goals. And the title of Francesco's seminar is KTH Research for Climate Planning and Sustainable Energy Access. The seminar will be approximately 45 minutes, and then we will take a very short break because I know that some of you have to leave, but we will reassemble after a couple of minutes and have a short session of about 15 minutes of questions and answers. And you will be able to post answers from the audience here, but also through our link, the web link. You will be able to post questions, and we, Francesco, will be able to answer those questions. But now you have a treat waiting for you. So a warm welcome to Francesco Fuso-Nerini. Thank you so much for being here, Francesco.
Thank you, Tina, for your very, very kind introduction. And I'm very happy to be here today presenting some of our work on climate and energy, and especially focusing, of course, on Africa. And I had, the interest and privilege of being involved in work in Africa since my PhD studies, so now over 10 years ago. That I did here under the supervision of a South African professor, Professor Mark Howells, that funded the division and some of the work that I'm going to present today. And over there I could spend time during my PhD in Tanzania, in Kenya, in South Africa. And since then we have had more work in a variety of countries. And of course I'm presenting some of my work, but also especially work from colleagues at both the Climate Action Center, but especially the Division of Energy Systems here at KTH. So I'm going to start a bit giving a very quick introduction about the center that Tina mentioned, the KTH Climate Action Center, and some of our work, but then I'm going to jump in some examples of work that has been done in collaboration between KTH and various universities, ministries, and in different countries in sub-Saharan Africa, but also in the north of Africa. So first of all, the center, as Tina mentioned, is a newish, now a couple of years old effort at KTH to try to unite work on climate adaptation and mitigation across the university. So as you're aware, this is a large technical university originally, even though now there are also non-technical fields covered here at KTH. And so there is quite a breadth of knowledge that is important to address the climate change challenges. And so one of the missions here is to try to unite all this knowledge, putting it together and trying to address gaps that are needed to be addressed for climate action. And this is very collaborative. So collaborative within KTH. So to date we have around 100 researchers across the university in a variety of fields that collaborate with us to different extents, but then also collaborate outside KTH. So with the key stakeholders in policy, in industry, and of course in other research institutions. And just very quickly, just to give a flavor of the type of work that we're doing, these are some examples of current projects. So starting from the left, we are working on SDG-based planning, so Sustainable Development Goals-based planning, where we are developing tools to kind of operationalize the detail that there is in the 169 targets of the Sustainable Development Goals to support policy formulation and project development. As an example, we have as a key partner to the center the United Nations Office for Project Services, UNOPS, which supports around 80,000 projects a year of infrastructures. So with them, we're developing tools that help these project managers to connect their project outcomes, which might be, I don't know, a large hydropower project in Ethiopia or something like that, with achievement of broader sustainability. So how is it going to affect equality, or how is it going to affect ecosystems, and so on and so on. The second in the middle, and I will talk a bit more about that related to our research on energy access, looking at climate and health. Here there are quite a few projects that are ongoing. The example I give there, of course, is looking at traditional ways of cooking, and I'll talk more about that. But also we're looking at the connection between climate and health in the Stockholm region and in Sweden with the so-called Stockholm Trio, which is a collaboration between KTH, Stockholm University, and Karolinska. So the three, let's say, largest universities in the Stockholm area. And last, we have quite a lot of work on climate digitalization. So on one hand, so we know that AI, digital technology, it's growing and it's becoming more and more important. So what are the environmental impacts of this technology? So we know this will need a lot of computational time. It will need a lot of resources and hours of computers crunching numbers, basically. So what will be the energy demands and the climate effect of this? But on the other hand, actually using artificial intelligence methods to try to address some of these climate challenges. So with this quick introduction, then I want to jump in some of our work on climate and energy planning. And here is actually a summary that my colleague Camillo, that is actually sitting there, has prepared of over a decade of work at KTH on energy and climate planning. And this is mostly from the Division of Energy Systems at KTH. If you're interested in reading better this, it's a little small there. There is also a poster in the back summarizing all this work. But as you can see, we have had work in a variety of countries, most often in collaboration both with international institutions. So you can see here some of our largest partners like the World Bank, various offices of the UN, like the Food and Agriculture Organizations, UNDESA, UNECE, and a variety of other partners. With, of course, collaboration and with local ministries and universities. So in all of these countries that are highlighted here, we had in-country work, but then I will show we have also, let's say, basic models and tools and analysis for quite a few other countries. One of the entry points is looking at energy for infrastructure planning. So looking at how we can provide data-driven tools to support energy and climate planning in collaboration with a variety of countries. And maybe the first one I would like to highlight is a tool that has been developed over many years, since 2012 here at KTH, which is called ONSET, the Open Source Spatial Electrification Tool. Basically what this tool does is a geospatial tool. So basically it provides an analysis over a whole area. So it could be a region or it could be a whole country. And it compares different technologies to provide full access to electricity. So you might be aware that in the world, I think the latest numbers is around 600 million people still lack access to electricity, which of course creates a lot of issues. So it creates issues for access to healthcare, to education, to a variety of things that are necessary for development. And basically this tool, what it does is that for each village, so each cluster in a country, it compares connecting to the grid. So usually when we talk about the electricity system, we have a centralized grid. And here in Sweden, for instance, the large majority of people are connected to the grid system. So comparing that to off-grid system. So let's say you are in a village that is 10 kilometers from a connection point to the national grid. So what is most cost effective? Is it building the transmission lines and the distribution in this village so that that is connected to the grid? Or is it more cost effective to do some kind of mini grid? So maybe could be a hybrid system, so maybe solar and some fossil fuel, or just renewables, so renewables and batteries, and distributing that electricity in that village? Or is it even more cost effective? Let's say you are in a very sparse area, so there's just a house every few hundred meters or even less. Is it most cost effective just to have a solar panel or something like that just for that house? So again, comparing grid, extending to the grid, mini grid systems and standalone systems. And this tool that was developed at KTH with many partners and many contributors is also at the basis now to a very used tool that is published by the World Bank, which is called the Global Electrification Platform. And basically, there's a small distinction here. So when we talk about the tool, so onset, it's let's say a rather complex geospatial tool that, let's say, requires some knowledge to be run, while the Global Electrification Platform reports a lot of the results from the tool. So hundreds of scenarios that are prepackaged so that, let's say, a policy analyst doesn't need necessarily to learn the whole tool, but can start looking at these dynamics and looking at some of the results. And then, of course, in the collaboration that we have with some of these countries, some of the analysts go to the level of learning and then adopting the tool, while some of the, especially the policy people, mostly look at this representation of the results. And there's been a lot of training in the past and ongoing. So more than 100 participants from around 30 countries have attended trainings on this tool. And this is just an example, but you can go on the website. There is 58 countries represented in these. This is an example of Rwanda, of the type of analysis that you can look at. And this is maybe a bit small, but basically, again, this is a prepackaged view of a number of analyses and scenarios. And on the left, people can select some of the assumptions that they want to make. One example is the level of demand. So do we want that in this analysis for people that still don't have electricity, do we assume that each household will have enough electricity just to power, I don't know, some phone charging, some radio, some basic systems and lighting, or do we want more electricity, so enough for household appliances or enough to provide an access to electricity similar to what we have here in Sweden. And of course that, as you can imagine, changes a lot the dynamics, because usually when you want a lot of electricity, maybe especially when it's an area that is dense with households, it might make more sense to connect to the national grid. In sense, it might be more cost effective. While especially for lower energy demands, and also in sparse areas, it might make a lot of sense to have standalone systems. And then, of course, there are a lot of shades of gray. So that's why you need this geospatial approach, because basically in this analysis, we have a lot of different layers. So we have information about where the population is and how much. We have information about the current level of electricity access. So that is done through nighttime lights maps mostly. So this is information that is collected, for instance, by NASA, that with their satellites go across on top of a country and captures where there is light. And then that's a decent proxy to understand where actually there is access to electricity. And then quite a lot of more layers. So what is the cost of different technologies? What is the wind availability? There is availability of hydropower or small hydropower and so on and so on. So all of this information together then gives us the information on the right here. So across the country, then we compare, for instance, here we see that it's a mix of solutions between extending the grid, standalone photovoltaics, hybrid systems, that is PV, PV with some other technology, and so on. So this is, let's say, one type of analysis, but also recently we've done more and more work to enrich that analysis. And one example is some more work we've done recently with the World Bank, coupling some other tools. I will not, today we don't have a lot of time to go in detail in each one of the tools. But basically what we're trying to do is also to connect these issues of access to electricity with, let's say, climate and climate finance considerations. And doing that, we connect this onset tool that I spoke about until now with another tool that was generated here at KTH, which is called Osmosis, the open source energy modeling system. And let's say the difference between these two is that the one that I talk about until now, onset, mostly look at off-grid, so places that are don't have electricity access up to now, and it has an information about the spatial distribution of these technologies. While the one on the left, Osmosis, is a national electricity, mostly grid planning tool. Long story short, putting the two together, we can also investigate some issues around the connection between grid dynamics and off-grid dynamics, but also investigate what levels of climate finance or carbon tax, depends how you see the issue, could result in different electricity mixes. And actually what we see in some of these results is that sometimes decent level or levels of climate finance could be enough to tip the solution from having quite a lot more fossil fuel based electricity generation to more renewable based electricity generation, which of course gives quite a lot of information both on the need and usefulness of climate finance. So for instance, these $100 billion a year that were promised from let's say richer countries to poorer countries in the Paris Agreement. And of course also gives quite important information for planning and for instance to inform the development of NDCs, which is nationally determined contributions. I guess all of you are familiar with NDCs, but NDCs are, let's say, the key tool of the Paris Agreement, where each country in the world is supposed to present NDCs outlining their contribution to climate action. And actually, since COP27, so a couple of years ago, countries have decided that these NDCs need to be updated every year. So there is really a need of, let's say, data-driven methods and tools that can be used to inform this analysis. Actually, in more recent improvement, so as you can imagine, these tools are used quite at planning quite at a broad scale for, let's say, pre-feasibility. But in recent improvements, some of this is mostly developed by some of our PhD students. We've looked at actually how can we connect this high-level planning to the planning of, let's say, the grid routing and the mini grids in detail in a specific region. So, for instance, here you can see in black the existing grid in a certain area. And then the tool is now capable to understand, depending on where the population is, to give a proposal of how the grid should be extended in a way that makes the most sense, also given the topographical, so the geographical characteristics of the area. Yes, so that is, let's say, the electricity system, and maybe if I have a second later, I will actually show you the website where this is all put together. But then I would like to talk about another tool that has been developed more recently. This was published just last year, trying to tackle the connected and very important challenge of clean cooking. Well, I guess most of you are aware that unfortunately almost 3 billion people in the world still cook in traditional ways. Traditional ways meaning collecting firewood or purchasing some kind of firewood or charcoal and then burning it many times indoors in many times unsustainable ways. That has a lot of issues around poverty, around equality. So in households that use this type of cooking, many times is women and children collecting firewoods for hours every day, which is time, of course, that could be spent in other ways. And also it has a clear and strong connection with health outcomes. So it is shown in research how this is one of the major cause of indoor air pollution and deaths due to pollution in the global south. And so since a couple of years ago, we have been working with the Clean Cooking Alliance, which is an organism of the UN, the World Resource Institute, but also with country analysts. So this was first developed in an application with the government of Nepal, where they have a very strong drive to electrical cooking, and they wanted to have some data-driven tools to inform their policies. And since last year, we're also working in collaboration, still with these two partners, but also the ministries in Kenya, where the policy is a bit more LPG focused, but still there is a need of this kind of tools to inform strategies. But similar to the electricity tool, this is a geospatial tool. So for each square kilometer of a given country, it compares the traditional ways of cooking, which is the used way of cooking, so with firewood and charcoal, for around 80% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa, with more modern ways, which could be going from the most modern, electricity, LPG, but also, let's say, improved cook stoves that maybe still use the more traditional fuels, but with better stoves that are more efficient, or maybe have some way of getting the bad fumes or the pollution out of the household. And basically, for each square kilometer of a given country, this compares the cost and benefits of this transition. So the costs, which of course are like capital, operation and maintenance, and fuel costs, but also the benefits. So the benefits for health, the benefits for equality in terms of monetizing the time that each day is saved in a household not to collect this firewood, and also the benefits in terms of greenhouse gas emissions that are saved. And these are, so on top of the two projects that I mentioned in Nepal and Kenya, where we are actually working in collaboration with analysts in the country, last year we have published this paper in Nature Sustainability, which provides an initial analysis for the whole sub-Saharan Africa. And it provides quite striking results because we see that there is a strong, how we call, market failure, because if you would take into account all the costs and benefits of this, let's say, issue, even though 80% of the people still cook with firewood and charcoal, as I said before, not a single person in sub-Saharan Africa should be cooking in those ways when you take into account health and equality and so on issues. And in one of our scenarios, we look at what would happen, what will be the benefits of achieving universal access to clean cooking. And we find using, let's say, estimates of morbidity and mortality from equations that the World Health Organization uses, that almost 500,000 deaths could be avoided every year in the sub-Saharan African subcontinent. We could save a lot of health costs, so around $65 billion of health costs avoided, around 4% of the GDP in sub-Saharan Africa, and also avoid quite a lot of emissions, so around 600 million tons of CO2 avoided, which represents almost 2% of the global emissions, which may not sound like a lot, but it is a lot. And the thing here is also that abating or reducing 1 megaton of CO2 here in Sweden costs this much, while doing this with clean cooking costs this much. So it's much more cost competitive because it's, let's say, cheaper and easier measures to do to reduce emissions. So there is a very strong rationale both to look at this with a climate and finance lens, with a health lens, and more broadly with a planning lens. So these are, let's say, the ones that I presented up to now. So Onset, the electrification tool, and OnStove, the clean cooking tool, are our key tools that we have developed looking at geospatially planning for access to modern energy. But then also I would like to mention a little bit more work from our colleagues. And more recently, you might be aware that Horizon Europe, so one of the key funding mechanisms in the European Union, has started a lot of programs that promote EU and Africa collaborations. And some of my colleagues have been very good at being part of this project and also starting some. So this is a new project starting this year called Reintegrate. And you also have the contact there at the bottom, another Francesco, but Francesco Gardumi, not me, that coordinated from KTH this very large consortium of universities, as you can see, both in Europe and in Sub-Saharan Africa. And it still looks at using different type of tools and models to inform these policy dialogues on both climate and energy. And also, one key thing of this project is that it wants to contribute to create a permanent network of experts across the EU and Sub-Saharan Africa. And so this project has a strong focus on networking, a strong focus on mutual capacity development. As I mentioned before, I mean, all of these efforts have been collaborative. So, of course, some of the tools or the open access to open source tools have been initially developed here, but then they were co-developed later with exchange of information, exchange of data, and of course, it would not be possible without that. So this is quite large project that is starting now. Another project, same content as before, that I would like to mention is more broadly technical assistance programs. And this has been a long-standing collaboration with the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, where on demand governments in the Global South have requested trainings on integrated resource modeling. And then mediated through UNDESA, KTH has been involved in a number of efforts there. And one of the key sets of work here has been working on the nexus, or how we call it here, CLUES, the Climate, Land, Energy and Water nexus. So not only looking at energy planning and energy models, but how do we look at these integrated, or these resources in an integrated way. And the last program I would like to mention is a very large program funded by the UK Development Assistance, which is called Climate Compatible Growth Program. This based or coordinated by the UK, is actually coordinated by this South African professor, Professor Mark Howells, that was previously here at KTH, but now he has left and work at Imperial College and Loughborough University. But we're very pleased still to collaborate with him through many projects, and especially this climate compatible growth, where it's a very large project still working on some of the tools that I mentioned, but also many other tools for energy and climate planning. And from our side, from KTH, in this program, we have worked in Kenya, Zambia, Laos, Vietnam, India, and Ghana. On a variety of issues. And also wrote here the contact for main contact here at KTH, which will be Associate Professor William Asher. And I think that's all for now. I'm happy to discuss a bit more or to show something more.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Francesco. I think since we are slightly ahead of schedule, I think we'll do the questions now. So we'll skip the mini break and you will be able to stretch your legs afterwards. So thank you very much again. I think before we start with the questions, let me just mention very briefly that we also have an opening event here in this venue where we welcome both attendees in real life, such as you here, and also welcome participation online. And the opening event will start at 4:30 p.m. That's right, isn't it? 4:30 p.m. And then the poster sessions will be actually not only posters, but actually people standing by the posters and talking about their different projects. And then at 5:30, we have a fireside chat between Andreas Göttenberg from Stint and our KTH Vice President for International Relations, Stefan Östlund. And they will talk about challenges in international collaboration. So I really recommend attendance, and I hope we'll see you there then as well. Now, getting back to Francesco. Are there any, so we have questions hopefully submitted online, and if there are any questions from the audience, perhaps the audience that is here, perhaps we could start with the audience that is here. Are there any questions for Francesco? Okay, I have one in the back and then one in the front. So one in the back there. Do we have a microphone for? Yeah, thanks.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Nicolas Foissier. I work for a company called Pamoja Cleantech. We have been working on different renewable energy projects and energy access in Africa. Right now we have a clean cooking project in Mozambique, and I was quite interested by the tool you presented about clean cooking. What do you see could be the applications of the tool practically? And is it possible to use it for carbon credit calculations, for instance?
That is a very good question. So in practice, it is possible to use it in many ways. Let's say the design has in mind mostly high-level policy development. So we have mostly been using it in collaboration with the ministries. But I could imagine also for, let's say, a company, it could be a very valuable resource to analyze geographically a region, let's say Mozambique, and analyze how different type of technologies, given the current situation, compare. It does include considerations about greenhouse gases. So we haven't been using it in practice yet for calculating carbon credits, but I imagine it is possible with a bit of development. And more broadly, yeah, as I mentioned, all these tools are open source. So of course it takes a bit of time to learn GIS and the Python in the background, but my colleagues have spent a lot of hours developing very accessible training material that is available online. So in theory, anyone could go there, look at this tool, learn it, and then apply it for their geography. And it's true, so the cooking tool is newer, but for the electrification tool, we are very happy now that in many of the publications and studies where we see onset being developed, we are not involved. And that, of course, is the best case scenario, because we don't want to be involved in every single study. We want that this is uptaken in various countries and for various developments.
Thank you. We will take a few questions from the online participants, but first, the gentleman in the checkered shirt.
Mats Lexell from Electric Power Engineering. Thank you very much for your very nice presentation. Fantastic work, fantastic tools addressing very big and very important issues. And then I have a bit more tricky question, because here in Sweden, as you know, the political direction is kind of changing a bit at present inside Sweden. And we all know that the kind of problems that you are addressing, they are global. They are not in the global south or anything like that. You are really global. Are you thinking of working more and being more active, so to say, on this side to show how important your research and the questions that you raise are also for Sweden and not only for they over there?
Well, actually, we have done and tried to do that. To be fair, the very first development of Onset, so back in 2013 or 2012, was financed by a small project with SIDA, and it was for a single country, for Ethiopia. So that gave a bit of a spark to start this. But then, of course, since then, different parties of different politics have different waves of interests. But I do agree completely. Like, this is a global issue, and there is a lot of benefits also to address this in conjunction. And I think somehow the European Union has realized that with releasing this kind of large funding for collaboration between EU and sub-Saharan African institutions. I was honestly quite disappointed by the Swedish government that erased much of this development funding. I know that's creating issues, but hopefully that can be rethought.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the online audience? No? No questions from there? Then, are there any? Yes, go ahead. There's one and there's another one. Yeah, so.
My name is Anna.
Just a second, we need the, we need the microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Anna Björnberg Mikkelson. I'm from Aalto University from Finland. Thank you, Francesco. This was very interesting indeed. A lot of very new things for me. I have a few questions related to the electrification tools. So first of all, both sound very interesting, and I can imagine very useful for a large part of populations all over the world. So both the onset and the osmosis. Now you would think that the sort of scope for them to be used is very large and unexplored, probably. But what would you see are the main sort of limitations or challenges to this to make it even more usable for more people?
Yeah, no, of course. Well, as with any tool, there are a lot of limitations, and one key thing in any modeling effort is understanding what is it valuable for. So what is most valuable for, what it has been mostly used for, is kind of high-level, ministry-level planning. So trying to understand some of these key dynamics, trying to understand what are the costs and benefits of different options, and give an overview of some of the key dynamics. So for instance, which areas does it make sense to electrify first? Which areas, or broadly, what is the role of on versus off-grid technologies, also looking at different scenarios. But then, of course, it's a techno-economic tool. So some of the behavioral aspects are overlooked, and especially, maybe even more than for electrification, for the cooking aspect. So the tool that we thought about looks at a set of parameters that are valuable for understanding some policy considerations, so health cost, capital cost, and so on. But then when you look at behavioral parts, that's much more complex. So we know from many studies that it's not simply that someone cooks with firewood and then you arrive with electricity and then, oh, wonderful, we just changed the electricity. It's more complex than that. And many times households end up cooking with different fuels and so on. So of course, let's say this starting analysis should be complemented by real understanding of the dynamics in the country. And then, of course, there are many more dynamics that need to be involved. So, again, these are high-level country or region-level tools. Then I wouldn't be so sure if you do an analysis at the level of Rwanda, and then, let's say, from this geospatial, we see a village, geospatial analysis, we see a single village, and we see, okay, from our analysis, solar PV is the most cost effective there. I wouldn't directly go there and invest. You would need to go in the field, try to understand, okay, actually, does it make sense? Did we have good enough data? So maybe we estimated from data from NASA from 2 years ago that that village was not electrified, but maybe now it is. So again, these tools are very good for a forced pass and informing policy, but then there are a lot of more dynamics to consider to make actual change.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand well. One following question: can governments or countries then adapt these models? Can they actually sort of develop it further?
No, absolutely. No, that's the goal, and they have done and they do. So some of these tools have been at the basis of electrification policies in some of the countries I mentioned. Some of these tools have been at the basis of the national determined contributions. And again, the best case scenario is that after a while, us at KTH are not needed anymore. So when the tools are, or this type of analysis are done directly in country and updated every year.
Thank you. And I think we had a question here as well. Yeah.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I'm from Tanzania. My name is Samuel Kimambo from University of Dar es Salaam. In Tanzania, we have a problem with electricity. There's not enough electricity. So I think this tool will be suitable for my country to do some analysis on distribution of power and development of power planting. But the challenge is that you may find that the energy is not enough, but instead of try to use another source of energy, but they try to increase the distribution, the national grid, they increase the distribution to the rural area. But the energy is not enough. And the problem is that we have shared electricity so that we are getting this zone, they are getting this time, and another zone they cut off, it gets another time. I would like to ask that if this tool can make the analysis, the optimization to know that maybe you may find this area, this time they have the wake and the electricity is not there, but in the evening they are going at home and at working place then electricity is coming, and at home electricity is not there. They cut off at home, and at afternoon in workplace they cut electricity, and when they return home in evening, at home they cut, but at work they return the electricity. So I would like to ask if this tool or platform can make that kind of optimization to know that which time will be suitable for the distribution or the shifting of that kind of electricity. That's my question.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Very, very relevant. So using in conjunction the two tools that I mentioned, so the onset tool that it looks at this off-grid planning and the osmosis tool that look at grid planning, it is possible somehow to look at the dynamic between how much electricity we have available in the grid versus how much we could have off-grid. And of course, I mean, you're completely right. The two need to go hand in hand. So you cannot just connect a lot of households and villages, but do not install more power capacity on the other hand, because then, as you say, you just need to decide either that someone gets electricity even though they are connected, or you just have power cuts all the time. These specific tools, I wouldn't think they're probably the best suited to go to hourly resolution. So to go saying each single hour you could give power to this or that other use, so industry or or household. I mean, you could do some type of analysis there, looking at the different projections of demand, but and in different times. But there are tools that are better suited, I would say, to do the kind of analysis that you say, and that connects, of course, then to the discussion before. So there are quite a bit of different tools out there, and it's important to understand what does what. Yeah, and I'm very glad that you're here from Tanzania. I've spent a couple of months during my PhD in Tanga, looking at agriculture energy nexus.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? There's one. I think this will be the last question then.
Hello, my name is Ingrid Nilda and worked in the sub-Saharan as well. And but I have another tricky question. If you have worked in conflict zones, anything with your projects and programs?
Actually, a couple of years ago, we had a project that was funded by the World Bank in Somalia, which is a very tricky area, and it was applying this also in collaboration with the governments of both Somalia and Somaliland. Applying the electrification tool. And then, of course, one of the scenarios was not only looking at availability of power, it was also looking at security of supply in different areas. And there you can think of off-grid solutions having some advantages compared to a centralized grid that is more vulnerable to some of these events. I would have to remember more areas, but Somalia was probably the most relevant.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesco. Once more, a big applause. And a very small, without the dust, very small thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you so much. Thank you all for participating. This ends our first session of the KTH in Africa Days. And I hope to see you back again this afternoon at 4:30 p.m. when we open our poster session and where we have the fireside chat that I was talking about before. Thank you for participating, and bye for now.